This is Stefan. Hi, Stefan.
Hello.
Stefan and I got to talking over email, and he shared that he's a mechanical designer using the Moonlander with SolidWorks. And if you've been following ZSA for some time, you may have noticed that many of our users are programmers and developers, but actually you can do a lot with our keyboards in design applications. So Stefan has a very complete layout that lets him do stuff quickly in SolidWorks, and he was gracious enough to demo it for us. So thank you for that, Stefan. And
Of
with
course,
that,
of
I
course.
will hand off over to you.
So
And we can
share my
stop the video
screen.
so that it's all about the screen share.
So see my screen here.
Yep.
So really this layout is essentially a half moon, but that is also being used as a keyboard. So you'll notice just about every function that I use in SolidWorks is on this left hand here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have, I think about 12 layers. It is a bit of a more maximalist, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
layout, where there's a bunch of layers. And my my goal here is to fit as many SolidWorks commands that I use on a daily basis into just the left half of this keyboard.
Yeah, I hear CAD applications tend to be a little bit menu heavy usually, right? Like there's a lot of digging through
Yes.
menus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they there's because especially SolidWorks is such a versatile CAD software and it's used for 100 different applications. So they kind of give you a feature for everything, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so you really want to streamline that because if you're constantly, sorting through menus, as I see some of my coworkers do, it really bogs down on your time and it's just messes with your flow, I find.
Right. For sure.
So I have most of my layer switching is actually done via combos.
Mm-hmm.
So I have here, this is my base layer, and this map up here in the top left. This is essentially the base layer map in SolidWorks.
So you made this
So,
map on your own. You just created this
yep,
graphic.
this
Yeah.
is just a screenshot essentially um, of Oryx that I've photoshopped.
That's
That's all this.
awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah, so it's it's a bit hard to follow because it's a lot to take in. But the top left is the key pressed alone, and then the top right is held. So I have auto shift enabled on
Hmm.
this. So that's not used only for typing, but also for essentially those shortcuts, because then you can go control and also control shift with
Okay.
just the one thumb button, right?
Right.
So you're kind of maximizing what each key can do. And I really try and avoid the double press because I find it messes with my flow a bit.
Yep.
Um, and so I much prefer to just have a press, a hold, and then a control press and a control hold. And that
Okay.
gives me, as you can see, just about every of the main commands that you use, the general commands.
Hmm.
Um, on top of that, I have a layer here that's just for different features. So this
So
is inserting each of
is
these
like
features.
a model you could open to show some of these actions?
I guess I could make something.
Oh, that's awesome. That'd be interesting to see for
Um,
sure.
so in CAD, you'll start with a sketch
Hmm.
always. So I'll go here, make just a square. So this is, I guess, your first snag that you'll notice in this layout is where are all the numbers, right? So if you press S, D, and F at the same time,
Hmm.
this becomes a numpad.
Oh, that's awesome.
So now I've
So
got a
it
numpad.
toggles into it. Obviously, you hit them and then you let go.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So I should say, so this one, this is D and F.
Hmm.
This is a one-shot layer, but you'll notice for each of these, I have a lock layer here.
Okay.
Um,
Which is cool.
so
We
these,
just recently introduced this. It's very nice to see that you're already using it.
yeah, yeah, I did see that. Because stuff like this, these features, you only really need them for one key press. You're not really comboing off on these. Like you'll make a sketch and then you'll go do something like this where, you're defining some features, right? And then you'll come back to it later. And then I also have a constraints. So this is for when you're in a sketch, if you're doing this, there are a bunch of these constraints here. Oh, it's kind of in the way. It's a bunch of these constraints, and there's maybe 20, maybe 15 to 20, I want to say.
Wow.
And you probably only use maybe like 6 of these regularly.
So
As you can
that lets you
imagine.
like toggle a constraint just with a keystroke.
Yeah. So if I wanted these to be like perpendicular, sorry, um, that would be parallel. My bad. I forgot to lock the layer.
Hmm.
So if I go here, if I want these to be perpendicular, right? Instead of going back into the menu, right? If I were to do this without this keyboard, it doesn't seem like much. You're finding this in this menu, right? And you're clicking this. But if you're doing this, like a really good example today at work, I had essentially, I had about 20 of these tubes that I had to fit into a larger tube as kind of cable management, right?
Hmm.
And so it kind of looks like this. And you've just got a bunch of these, and you have to mate them together, right? Because they're kind of sitting like this.
Right.
So if you were to do this manually, this gets tiring very quickly. If you want to do this,
Right. So you're constantly clicking and clicking and clicking. Right.
yeah. Whereas with this layout, I can just much quicker
Oh, that's cool.
go
Hmm.
through. Like if I want these to be equal. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
you
Okay. Yeah.
see,
You're kind of like just interesting. Like watching it, it looks like magic because you are not really doing anything on the screen. I see you like selecting
exactly.
an entity and then it changes instantly.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And so that gives you can imagine over the course of a day, it drastically speeds up your workflow.
Hmm.
Um, so that's another one here. And then yeah, that one's also one shot layer. This one I use more like a toggle, but each of these, um, yeah, they're one shot layers as I mentioned. And then to exit them, actually, if I were in the numpad, for example, it's the both thumb buttons. It's this enter and escape essentially.
Oh,
Um, that's an exit.
that okay. So that also keeps your just your left hand engaged there. Like you said, I kind of using it
Yep,
like a half moon, really.
exactly. Yeah, you'll notice um, every single command. Like you'll see, I even have a mouse here that I use when I'm remapping stuff in Oryx. But like all of these layers and everything in the right hand, like this layer here is just a number row and a function row, and I never use that
Okay.
if I'm modeling. It's really only for typing, right? So everything for typing is in the right hand, and that just leaves everything here. And I've I've iterated over this quite a bit,
Mhm.
and kind of going through finding the optimal
Yeah,
placement for everything.
we'll share a link to the layout itself under the video.
Yeah. So those are my layers. I guess I do also have this is a navigation layer. I have an auto hotkey script that I have set up that will essentially go to all of these um, and a few other things. I have a gaming layer here.
So do you find about the navigation layer, do you find that as you work, does it does it work for you? Do you use Alt Tab less frequently, less often?
I actually just re-added an alt tab. Oh no, this is a control tab. Sorry, I don't have alt tab on this. I guess I would need to do this. Um,
So
and
you
I
hardly ever do that? You
I
mainly use
never
Oh wow.
exclusively, but I also have I should mention. So this here is a delete key, but it's also a momentary key for arrow keys. Um, and then I have set up um, what are they called? Virtual desktops. I have set up here.
Okay. So
So I
when
will,
you hold down your delete key, you get basically
yep,
like an
arrow keys. Yep.
arrow keys right next to it. Okay, that's super interesting.
And the other thing you'll notice through these layers is
So
really
you
kind of
use, sorry, just
yep,
on that delete key. So you use your
yep,
thumb for that as well. That's like a thumb
yep,
action. Okay.
So I I have very small hands.
Hmm.
And so I actually consider this to be the primary thumb key and this to be the secondary one.
Okay.
This is kind of a tertiary um, thumb key.
And I see you did not actually assign the outermost ones, like the third one.
Oh, yeah, you'll notice a lot of these are blocked off. I have a full zip kit. So
That's
those are
awesome.
all completely blocked off.
That's,
Yeah.
I think that's super notable. That's really something to notice here, just looking at this, because it's this combination. The layout is very, very dense. Like you have a lot packed into it, but you're only using the keys that you're actually comfortable using. You're not
Yeah.
stretching. And I think that's such an important learning from here, that you can, and in my opinion, you should do it like this. It's a great example.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm sure you're very aware of Ben Valek and
Yep,
his videos and
for
his kind
sure.
of um,
He's a friend, of course.
yeah, the way that he approaches these, right? And that kind of inspired me. But also, again, I'm buying this for the ergonomics of it. So I'm not going to be using these keys out here where, I'm stretching my pinky way out and
That's
it just kind of
awesome.
ruins the point.
Totally.
Um,
That's really great to see.
yeah, and then these I would, many people have blocked these off because they're two spaces away, right, from your home row. But I keep these just because they're good. Like you see, like rarely used. You're not using them with anything else. It's print screen, and then like my media for like pausing and playing
Yep.
music and such. So these are like very rarely used.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that brings me to all my layers. I guess I do have that one as well. I do have this reference button here. This is a thumb key I would have removed, but it's actually kind of nice. I have, again, an auto hotkey script that will pop this image up on the screen for me if I hold that. So it's essentially a shortcut to my own kind of mini version of Keymap, right?
Haha, I love that. So, okay, just to connect that top left image with the layer I'm seeing. So this is all layer zero software
Yes.
mappings. Like this is your layer zero. This is just how layer zero happens to work in the context of SolidWorks.
Yeah. So if you SolidWorks is great because it's very, very mappable.
Hmm.
Um, and if you look, you'll see the extent of um, all of these shortcuts that I have.
That's awesome.
And yeah, most of these are in this base layer, right?
Yeah, this
Um,
this is an interesting thing I've noticed. Like also often like creative apps like this, and also video editing suites, by the way, have a lot of options for key remapping, and the hardware is just not there. Like if you're working with like a stock keyboard, but
yep,
once you have a keyboard that can play nice with an application like that, it really unlocks a lot, because the application is kind of waiting for those remappings. Like it lets you do it.
absolutely. Yeah. I had before this, I had a 16 key macro pad that was ZMK, and I love that thing.
Hmm.
But the issue there, right? 16 keys is great, but you don't use your thumb for anything, right?
Right.
And it very, very, you don't think it's a big deal, but it absolutely limits your options. And I was doing some pretty crazy, um, some pretty crazy ZMK, um, layers within layers within layers, just to be able to fit all of all this map into the 16 keys, and it was just
Sure.
too much.
Yeah, that does sound intense, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Um, So yeah, I guess I should probably go into how I use this again. I've really tried to prioritize the home row and everything. Like you'll notice in these layers, I've just got my home row and then one key above, one key below.
Hmm.
And you'll notice, especially in this one, that I find this, it's an R and a Q here because it's a QWERTY layout.
Yep.
I find these a bit, it's just a little bit of a stretch where I actually have to take my thumb off to reach it. Um, and so I found my fingers were actually getting kind of tired because again, I have very small hands. So I try and map these to rarely, rarely used
Hmm.
stuff like a like settings command, and then here I have insert and replace.
Right.
So yeah, I think. just about everything. I also have this A and S is another combo that's actually a, guess if I make a new, oh geez, actually a Alt Tab A and S. And that again, I just added today actually.
Oh,
um,
it's okay. It tabs to the other. Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. If you press A and S, it's a combo where it just
Flips over
sends
to
a,
another
sorry,
file.
not Alt Tab. I should Control Tab is what I
Control
meant to
tab.
say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, okay, so you had mentioned you added this today, and I kind of want to touch on this because um, I'm curious how do you iterate? How is your process? Okay, so you're sitting there working, doing something in SolidWorks, and and you get an idea like, oh, I wish this key did something, or oh, this key is not actually comfortable to use. Do you go and fix it right then and there? How do you typically iterate?
Yeah, most of the time that is what I do. Sometimes I'll just spend a whole afternoon if I have, sometimes, you can kind of iterate over a layout and you've kind of optimized as much as you can and you realize the layout itself is the limitation, if that makes sense. And so
Like muscle
sometimes I'll
memory or the layout? Like,
the structure of how I guess the layers are organized, for example,
okay.
like how you access the layers or how return home. Think of an example. I had there was one time, so this um, kind of a tangent here, but this control key is incredibly important in SolidWorks because it's the pan. If you hold control and use the center mouse button, it's the pan which you use constantly.
Right.
It's probably the most used key. And so, but I also wanted, of course, these four commands in the quote unquote base layer. And so what I was trying to do is use, is it the LM? I think it's the LM um, layer switch where it's control plus that layer.
Right, yeah, it's a layer mod. Yeah. So you switch to layer with a modifier enabled.
Yep, exactly. And I just found that I wasn't able to use the enter key nearly as much, and I couldn't really find a good spot for it. So then, at that point, I had to kind of scrap that idea, right? And so that's when I kind of overhaul the whole deal and kind of restart from scratch, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but every time it always ends up being, a major improvement and it gives me way more options. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. It's really interesting because I've found, at least in my own learning, that I have many ideas, but my personal bottleneck is muscle memory. Like I come up with things and then I literally forget they're there. Um,
Yeah.
and this is especially true, I think, for combos. So you're like, how many combos do you actually have here that you routinely use?
I think only about seven. I can pull up Oryx, but I have one for this layer, a
Mhm.
second, a third, a fourth,
Okay, that's
and then a
you're just blowing my
fifth
mind here
here.
because that's like super fluent on these
Yeah.
combos, which for me, I love combos. It's a great feature, but like I guess I'm kind of dumb because for me, like you go over two, three combos, I'm lost. Like it takes me a
Yeah.
long time to really internalize them and use them fluently in my work. So it's very, very interesting to see what you just did there.
Yeah,
How you're like,
that is interesting. So I've kind of structured this. It's really just the S, D, and F keys, where it's any combination of two or three of these keys is all of my combos, really. Um,
but it's
because
not
right,
like it's not sensitive to your key press order, right? Like SDF would be a single combo, even if you start F, then D, and then F. It's just one combo. Not doesn't matter if you go
yep,
FDS. It's still the same.
yep, that's right.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how I kind of, I guess, imagine that, how I visualize it, and how I keep kind
No,
of track of where my
that's a
combos are.
great tip, actually. Yeah, sometimes I kind of find myself thinking, I do use a ton of dual function keys more than combos, but I find myself thinking almost of like grip shapes or like claw shapes. It's I find myself thinking about the shape I make with my hand as I use
Yep.
something, as I use a given sequence of keys. And so having your combos concentrated around 3 keys makes a ton of sense. That might make it easier to learn. That's a great tip,
Yeah,
actually.
absolutely. I find that the way that I kind of think about this is it almost like an anchor key. So you'll notice this S, D, and F is also my arrow keys.
Right.
So
Right.
essentially, I use this D key as almost an anchor for my entire layout, if that makes sense. And like
Makes
you'll
sense.
notice if I go to my numpad, it's the 5 key. It's the
Ah,
direct middle of it.
yeah, yeah. That is super interesting. So you're really oriented to that key. So wait, so I'm really curious. The tactile bump is still on your F key, right? Like the
Yep.
physical. Okay. But really, really you're using the D as a center here.
Yeah, and that's really just because you want to avoid your pinky usage as much as possible, right?
Mhm.
So I try and have everything essentially in this, I guess, really in this numpad area. I try and keep as much of my commands as in this numpad area as I can.
Right. So then I see actually that you're using, rather than have like your plus, minus, and so on next to the digits, they are on the same keys. So those are hold?
Yeah, this was a game changer that it really didn't come to me. Uh, but yeah, it's if you want like 25 divided by 2, your fingers aren't moving from that area whatsoever.
So for the divided, you just kind of held down 7 right now.
Exactly. These are all holds.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing. I
uh,
don't think I've seen that before. That is
really,
so interesting. Yeah, I don't, I mean, maybe other people have done it. I don't think I personally have seen somebody, at least not an Oryx, like using the same keys. I always see it like next to it. That's
yeah, no,
awesome.
I think that in my opinion, that is like objectively the best way to organize your numpad because it's so intuitive to me because the everything on the right, this plus and multiply is kind of, I guess, how do I explain this? To
Like it
me,
makes
going
things
to the right,
bigger. It makes things
yeah, going to
bigger.
the
Yeah.
right is bigger, yeah,
Hmm.
and a minus and a divide, of course, is smaller. So to me, this is so intuitive where these are. It just makes sense.
That is so interesting. I don't, that's because that's another thing, right? Like where you put those symbols, because those are, even when they're next to the numpad, they are not arranged in this layout.
Yep.
So that's awesome. I love
And
that.
it's just, why wouldn't you? If you have this key, unless if you're maybe a very fast typist or you have issues, you find you're accidentally holding it by accident, but um, why wouldn't you use those keys, right?
Right.
It
Oh, that makes a
just
lot of sense.
it opens up so much more possibilities. And you'll notice I have a backspace. I've just moved it in one space. That's all it is. And that's just again an ergonomic thing when I'm typing stuff. Like you're always using the backspace for this. Excuse me.
Right.
But the nice thing about this is if I'm going through and I'm adding stuff, I still have access to all of the keys that I need. Um, so I'm not constantly switching back and forth because that was an issue that I found was that I would type something out, right? And I go, oh no, that's the wrong number. And I wouldn't have a delete key. So
Right.
I'd be in this numpad and I just want to press the delete key one time and then go back to typing numbers. So I've actually moved it down here. It's the hold function on this bottom left.
What's the tap there?
It's rebuilt. So this is so sorry, I'm just gonna zoom through this real quick just to give you an example.
Yeah.
So if you want to update this size, say 75 millimeters instead,
Mhm.
you'll notice it hasn't moved at all. And so you need
Right.
to do a rebuild. It's like a refresh, right? And so if I press that, then that
Okay.
moves. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's like total SolidWorks. That was very interesting because
Yeah.
in the I've been playing around with Plasticity, which is another like a little newer, much smaller CAD app, and there it just
Mhm.
happens. So okay, you need to rebuild in SolidWorks. That's cool. Okay.
There's some way of doing this. Oh, there it is. If you do it in this menu, it's a really weird SolidWorks quirk. It will rebuild automatically.
Okay.
So if you single click on it, um, it will rebuild automatically. But if you double click on the number, you get this different menu. It's SolidWorks is kind of goofy like that.
Okay.
Um, but a lot of you're rebuilding constantly. And you'll notice the big thing again. I'm never leaving this numpad layout, right? Because oftentimes, if I change this value, right, I'm gonna have to change, the value of a part that's right next to it, for example,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it kind of you get these cascading changes, and I just found it pretty tedious to be constantly switching back and forth between these two layers. Even though they're put in a really good spot, I still want to reduce the number of key presses, even
Yeah,
though
it's still a keystroke.
yeah, yeah. And that's, I guess, I would say one of the main downsides with this sort of layout where you have, these five different layers and all these different combos and everything is the keystrokes. Sometimes it adds up,
Hmm.
right? And you're like, oh, I just want to, add a cut to this face, right? And you're going like, oh, I need to go into this layer and I need to press this and I need to exit the layer. And it's not a big deal, but again, over time, over that, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, however many hours a year, it adds up and it really starts to bug you. It bugs me at least.
Right. So your
Uh,
solution there is not to make like to toggle into the when there is a layer that you think you're going to be, or when there's an operation you think you're going to be doing a bunch of, and it
mhm.
cascades into like you just toggle into the layer and you stay there, and that saves you all those keystrokes.
Yeah, exactly. Or in this case, yes, but in something like this feature, right? That's why I use one shots because now I don't have to exit this. Now it's already exit for me, right? Which is kind of the
Oh,
point
so
of a
you
one
solve it
shot.
the other way. Okay, so it's you just, yeah, it's just a one shot thing. You just do it and you keep going. You don't
Yeah,
even toggle into
exactly.
the layer. Like you, it's you toggle and you're out immediately.
And again, like this is what I was saying earlier, is that these, you're just using these features here, right? In this layer, you're really only using them for one key press.
Right.
You
Hmm.
don't need any more. And I do have a layer lock, but that's kind of a redundancy. Like you'll notice I also have this is a return to zero. And even though I have a combo to return in these, everyone makes mistakes. And there's been times where I forgot to re-add that combo um, to a layer. And, I get locked out and then you have to manually reset your keyboard, of course, right?
Yep.
I'm sure everyone's been there. At
Oh
least
yeah.
I hope so.
No, for sure. It happens.
um, yeah. So that's kind of, this is I think it's been 2 months. I've been working away at this. And again, like I said, like I've scrapped, maybe not completely scrapped, I should say. I've significantly reworked large portions of this layout because I just found some things I had an idea for and it just didn't work at all. It just, um, but this I find is pretty optimal because most of these things you're kind of switching in and out like this. Um, minus those exceptions, right?
That's awesome. Yes, yes. I think to me it's really interesting both the level of complexity that you attained here, but also like you say, like the way you iterate, like that you actually try stuff and then you realize, oh, this isn't working, and you're not stuck with it. You just go and you fix it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it sounds obvious, but I find that for some users it is not because it requires reevaluating. It also requires, I would say, some body awareness actually to say, oh, this like I'm contorting. Wait, I actually feel like stress in my fingers or whatever to realize,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't working. So it's very, very cool to see how you iterate on a layout for 2 months like this and end up with something deep.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, honestly. I'm a big fan, as you can tell, of these kind of systems, as I call them. It's just a whole, a whole layout like this, for example. And, you get through that kind of learning curve of it, right? But when you come out the other side, you just find that it's so rewarding using this. Like I have coworkers that come up to my desk and they're asking about something and they just see me using my layout and they're like, how do you do that? It's just, it's very, very rewarding and honestly a lot of fun. I do find it's uh, as fun as work gets,
That's awesome. That is very, very cool. Thank you very much for sharing. I
Yeah, of
really
course.
appreciate that. That's quite the layout. So again, we'll be I think this obviously will be on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find a link to Stephan's layout down below. And yeah, thank you very much, Stephan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Just a warning. By the time you see this, it very well have changed. Very
Yeah,
likely will have
that's
changed significantly.
I would fully expect
Um,
that.
so yeah, this is a never-ending process in
That's
a good
awesome.
way.
Amazing.
So
Thank you very much, Stephan.
yeah, thank you very much.